Homeschoolers are not disadvantaged and they legally can write their own IEP. A lot of parents think that they are at a disadvantage when they don't have services for their child. The problem is most don't realize the services their children get. Guess what? You already got it when you homeschool.
Welcome to the Christy-Faith Show, where we share game-changing ideas with intentional parents like you. I'm your host, Christy-Faith, experienced educational advisor and homeschool enthusiast. Together, we'll explore ways to enrich and transform both your life and the lives of your children. This episode is brought to you by a program I've been using going on 5 years now. Cross7, classically based musical memory work. I've seen firsthand how memory work has benefited my own kiddos, especially as they've grown older and started engaging in more complex homeschool material. What I love about this faith-based program is its dynamic blend of songs, videos, quizzes, and an interactive flashcard system. It's all designed to make learning and retention both fun and interactive. Whether you're already familiar with memory work or just getting started, check out the show notes for information and a free trial of Cross7. Cross7 is a family-owned company, and they truly are the sweetest people you would ever meet. This faith-based memory work program consistently wins awards, including first place in the Practical Homeschooling Reader Awards. Head over to cross7.org for more information. That's CROSSSEVEN.org. Or click the link in the show notes to start your free trial today. Welcome to today's show of the Christy-Faith Show. I am thrilled to have Peggy Ployhar here with us today to talk about homeschooling our kiddos with special needs. Peggy Ployhar is the founder and CEO of Sped Homeschool, the main host of Empowering Homeschool Conversations, a popular live broadcast and podcast that addresses relevant issues related to homeschooling diverse learners. A breast cancer survivor, the owner of Eternal Aerial Arts, and an aerial arts instructor and performer. She and her husband, Doug, live in League City, Texas, and after 19 years of homeschooling, have now graduated all three of their children from their homeschool. Thank you so much for coming on today, Peggy. The first thing I wanted to ask you is, what is your homeschooling story? What led you to homeschooling? And I would love the answer to that before you tell us how you started, how you got interested in starting Sped Homeschool.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So we lived in Oregon for a while, and some people at our church, I think they just had a lot of compassion for our family. And they invited me to a homeschool conference when my kids were preschoolers. And I came home from that conference and said to my husband, "Those are not my people." And I said, "I will never do this." I was a physicist. I worked in medical device regulation, and I loved being an engineer. I was going to go, after I had my two boys, I was going to go back to work and send them to school because I never even wanted to be a parent, let alone a homeschool parent. And so we ended up, our boys got a little older. I put my oldest in school, and he was in the principal's office every day. Mm-hmm. So I went, okay, what am I doing to mess this child up? It all came back on me. I was pretty certain there was something I was doing bad about parenting. And the principal had so much compassion. It was a private Christian school that my kids were going to. And she said, "I think he needs to be tested." I'm like, tested for what? I had no idea, what special education, nothing. I had no, this just wasn't in my vernacular. So we had him tested, and he tested with high functioning autism. At that point, 2 books existed on high functioning autism, let alone no curriculum. And I prayed about it. We thought about sending him to a public school. At that point, he was so depressed. I asked him what it felt like to be him. And he said, "Mom, it's like God is a bird and he's laid an egg, and that's me. And a snake has come and swallowed me up." And it just made me hurt. I was dealing with depression myself. I had been suicidal since 4th grade. I hid it very well. And my world just came crashing down. And God just really called me at that time to homeschool my kids, even the mess that I was in and they were in, because that was his path for our family towards healing. And that's a difficult place to start homeschooling. But it was the journey and kind of the bump that we needed to start that. So that's how I started homeschooling.
That brings to mind something. I actually wonder if a lot of people whose kids struggle, maybe they are diagnosed with a complicated learning profile or would be, I wonder how many people are in a very similar situation to yours where your homeschool journey starts in a very dark place.
Yeah. In our community, it's more often than not, actually. And so when COVID hit, we were probably more ready for that insurgence than any other community was, because I always said, as a special needs homeschooling consultant, I worked for both MSHE, Minnesota Association of Christian Home Educators, and then the Texas Homeschool Coalition. I was always firefighting. I was like the rescue, the EMT that showed up at the scene when the parents were falling apart. And that was my job, to start cleaning it up with them. So yeah, when all that hit, I think most homeschool communities had no idea what to do. And we were like, yeah, that's pretty, it's what we do. We clean up from here, and we help parents move forward.
How long since when you started homeschooling yourself did you start Sped Homeschool?
Sped Homeschool started in 2017. And wow, I had been homeschooling for quite a while, almost just like 17 years. But I started consulting for the Minnesota Association of Christian Home Educators about 3 years into my homeschooling journey. And I was really wary about taking that position, but they assured me, they're like, well, you're 3 years ahead of where everybody else is. And so I kind of just learned as I went. And I didn't know a whole lot, but I've been learning since then, and I'm still learning. And even though my kids have graduated, I continue to learn and continue to help people find the resources that they need. But yeah, Sped Homeschool was a product of me being a consultant for 2 different state organizations and never having anywhere to send anybody, because I felt like I was doing that firefighting. I was helping parents, let's get your child out of school. Let's get you, figure out how to start unschooling. And now, I'm sorry, I have nowhere to send you. So good luck, and I hope you make it. And so as I was working for the Texas Homeschool Coalition, they realized this. So when they had a budget cut, I had an assistant. I said, take my assistant. And they just released me to start Sped Homeschool with a lot of resources I actually had created for the Texas Homeschool Coalition. And knowing that my reach was way larger than Texas, which Texas is very large, but yet now we reach people across the globe with our resources.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question that I get a lot when I have a new homeschool mama who's maybe just joined Thrive Homeschool Community. She's recently pulled her child out of school or is about to. The main question is, what curriculum is best for blank? And then fill in the blank with the learning profile. Dyslexia, ASD, anything, OCD. I would love to hear, actually, let's just have like a mastermind right now, because I want to hear how you answer that. And I want to tell you how I answer it. Maybe you can correct how I answer it, because although I will say that I have been coaching parents whose kids have special needs for over 20 years as well. I would love to hear your wisdom on this, though, because as new homeschooling parents, we think it's all about finding the right curriculum, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. This was the question that all my consultants always hated to receive at conferences. No, because we'd receive it all the time, and they'd all look at me with blank faces at first because they had no idea how to answer it. And I'm like, well, what's your story?
Before we continue, I want to share with you a program that has been a game changer for our family. At our Learning Center, we instructed and helped kids through pretty much every program on the market. So we know firsthand just how important a solid math foundation is for our kids' futures. Finding the right homeschool math curriculum that didn't compromise academic excellence, but also didn't put me and my kids through the ringer was a challenge. Until one day, I found CTC Math. You guys, the rest was history. First off, it's a mastery-based program, which means your child gets a full grasp of the material. It's also loaded with mixed reviews, ensuring your kids don't forget anything they've learned. The questions are adaptive too, which keeps students confident and progressing at their own pace. But the best part, all the teaching, grading, and testing, done for you. With CTC Math, there is no compromise on excellence. Your child gets a top-notch education, and you just made your homeschool life easier. Visit CTC Math to get your free trial today. Whether you're newer to homeschooling or you've been homeschooling over a decade, the fact is creating a streamlined, successful homeschool is hard. The pressure is high, and the weight of responsibility often leads to self-doubt, second-guessing, and feeling completely overwhelmed with the excessive amounts of opinions and curricula options out there. We love our kids, and at the same time, the stakes are high. We don't want to mess this up. So how do we build a homeschool that our kids will thank us for when they're adults, and one that you have 100% confidence in? The first step to pulling all of that off is joining Thrive Homeschool Community. Thrive Homeschool Community is where you learn the 8-step homeschool success framework to build an undeniably successful homeschool. Each year and each kid presents us with uncharted territory. But when you have a good plan, the right plan, you can rest in the security and confidence that you are doing a great job. The path is easy. Join Thrive, say a quick hello to your new friends, start the 8-step homeschool success framework, and kiss anxiety goodbye. It's risk-free, no contracts. You can cancel anytime, no questions asked. Go to Christy-Faith.com. That's CHRISTY-FAITH.com. Enter promo code podcast for $10 off your first month. See you inside.
So the thing is children, even with the same diagnosis, are different. And so you homeschool based on the child. You know, you have to study the child. And you as a parent also have to know yourself. I actually did an experiment, being the physicist that I am. And I love to share this story because it helps people to understand just the process you have to go through to understand what curriculum you need to use. And so when I first started homeschooling, there weren't a whole lot of methodologies. I mean, Charlotte Mason didn't exist. Their unschooling wasn't even talked about. Road schooling, and no. So I knew there was the textbook method. I knew there was the literature-based method, and I knew there was a unit study method. So I figured, okay, I'm going to do an experiment. We're going to try these 3 methods and see what fits best for our family. I kept the era of what we were studying or the topic the same. So of course that was one less variable, the scientist that I am.
Yes,
and I just said, okay, we're going to study seafaring, 1400s, pirates, all of that. And so we first started with the textbook method, and I had some coloring pages for my kids, and I just about had a mutiny, and I said, oh no, this is not going to work. And so that lasted very shortly. That one day wasn't even a full day. And so then I thought, okay, literature-based, there's so much I loved, Sunlight was the big literature-based company back then. And I just, could dream of snuggling up with my boys on the couch, but they were jumping on the couch. And I was like, okay, this is not working either. We'll try the unit study. And so I got a book from the library on how to tie knots, the nautical, all of that stuff, got them 20 feet of rope, and they loved it. I said, okay, we're studying pirates. So if you tie the right knot, you can tie me up. And they're like, yes. So I didn't realize the very boring engineer that I was, that I could be so much fun. And so we discovered a lot about ourselves just through that process. And never looked back. I actually did unit studies all the way through high school for my oldest because he was very much a hands-on building type of learner. And I ended up teaching him mechanical engineering before he could learn to read, because he didn't learn to read till he was 12, but yet now he's a biomedical engineer. And so that never really surprised me in the process. And I think if we just take that step back and we go, well, what fits our family? What What are my kids interested in? All of those things. You have to go through this process of discovery and self-discovery of you, of your children. You may come out completely different than you thought. This mold that you were trying to stuff everybody into, instead of this beautiful thing that is waiting to be unpacked. So that's my long answer to what curriculum you need to use.
Well, I love it. And it's so funny because my answer does vary, where there's an element of me that wants to problem solve. And I'm like, okay, well,
Right.
it's actually probably the most flexible one, because you don't want to be so stuck that you have to actually throw it in the trash, and then, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's exactly what you said. It's not the curriculum itself. It's who you are and who your child is, and putting curriculum in its proper place. And what's nice is I do believe a lot of the curriculum companies out there also agree with this. You see in their, especially the good homeschool ones, that are written for homeschoolers, not written for like charter schools that are trying to sell to us, but like the ones that are truly written for homeschoolers. Usually at the beginning, they say like, this is about you and your family, adapt this. And then they usually give options for making, hands-on and things like that. That's beautiful. Peggy, you know what I think is going to really encourage some mamas listening to this today? I want you to explain where you were, because I did not know this. I did not know that your son did not learn to read till he was 12. Where were you when he was 11?
Yeah.
And what encouragement can you give a mama right now who is in a very similar place, probably scared out of her wits' end for this child, worried they're not going to be able to get a job, worried they will never get into a college? Where were you when he was 11? And then what wisdom, looking back, can you give us now?
Yeah. I always say this one was covered by grace. When I first started homeschooling my kids, I had no idea what phonics was, and so teaching reading was like scary, huge scary. I mean, I have a degree in physics. I avoided English and writing and everything that I possibly could in that realm. And here I'm supposed to teach it. And so what I ended up doing, because we lived in a state that required testing every month or every year. And so I knew that he wasn't reading. The test showed it every year. And so I just kept plugging along, but I thought in my mind, what is my big goal here? Is my big goal that he will be on grade level, that he'll be reading at grade level, or is my goal that he will love to learn to read and love reading and love literature? That I had to focus on. You have to focus on these bigger goals, because if you get stuck in the day-to-day of, we got to finish this assignment, this is our goal, it spirals you out of control. It actually will make you depressed. And so I kept it as the bigger goal. And I thought, okay, well, how am I going to achieve this goal if my child's not reading? Well, we're going to work on the workbook for 5 minutes a day, because that is all he can handle. We're going to do some things that are a little more out of the box as when it comes to that, maybe more hands-on, has some manipulatives, allows him to move things around because that's the way he is. I'm going to get him audiobooks. And I'm going to make sure that he gets audiobooks that he wants to listen to and that has good language and literature and speech in it, so that he is learning vocabulary and sentence structure. And then we're going to tell stories. As a family, we loved hiking, so we were always telling stories, and it was always one person picks 3 things, the other person has to make the story up. So I was teaching him all these components of language, arts, and literature, and I never really even knew it. And all of these things, and it's amazing how the brain works, because at age 11, he tested as a non-reader. I had records for that. At age 12, he tested reading at college level.
What?
Yes, because all of the things for his brain just needed to be in place. And he even asked me, Mom, I want the Iliad and the Odyssey, the non-abridged. And that's what he read. Yes. So it just takes time sometimes. And that may not be your story. Your child may be on the slow progression for a long time, but you can't lose sight of that ultimate goal. by getting stuck in all these tiny little things that are going on that maybe aren't going the way that you want them to.
I think one of the pieces, I see it as a grace and a gift. I always try to look at our struggles and try to find what gifts we are given. And we are wired to learn the most during our hardship. At least that's what I believe. I think that one thing about homeschooling children who have special needs is I feel like moms need to learn very quickly to tame the comparison beast. And I think that one of the gifts, one of the graces for having a kid who is just differently wired, maybe a struggling learner, not reading yet, is I feel like we often learn that lesson sooner. But all homeschool moms need to learn that lesson. Would you speak a little bit about your journey with comparison? I think it's really tough when we go on Instagram. And I will be the first to say, I am on Instagram. And interestingly, I just finished editing a vlog post when I took my kids out bird watching. And as I added the music and I added my voiceover, and I was thinking, am I lying? Because, we were, there were little fights in the car on the way. And
Yeah.
I'm hungry, I'm cold, I'm this. And that's not shown on Instagram. I'm very careful to make sure my content is real. At the same time, I would never want to be a person that makes homeschooling out to be this perfect thing that women see and they think to themselves, that would never be me, right? How can you help us today with that comparison?
Yeah. Thankfully, I didn't have Instagram back when I was homeschooling my kids. I'm that old, yes. But the place I had the hardest time was at homeschool conferences, because I would look, when I would come into a conference, I would look at, get your child into college by age, 7. That's kind of what it looked like in my brain. And I'm going, are they even going to graduate? And so I just wouldn't go to the talks because it would just be too much for me. I would avoid community, which was not good. And so over time, though, in the different roles I had, started making, connections and friends and realizing, my story isn't different. We created a homeschool pod before a pod was a pod because my kids got kicked out of co-ops. They, there was so much that was hitting us hard about you don't fit, you're not right, your family doesn't belong here. And so it wasn't even that I had to go out and look for it. It was like bombarding me every time I went to look for help. And so I just found I had to keep that close-knit group of friends that would speak truth into my life, that they would share their hardships and be in a real place with me. And when you have that community that can be real with you, you have to find it. I just remember I didn't have it at first, and I was praying. I'm like, I would go to like park dates at homeschool get-togethers, and I would be seeking out moms, like who are my people? Yes. I need people. And we moved a lot too. We moved from Oregon to Minnesota to southern Minnesota, then to Texas. And I always had to do that, but I didn't give up in searching for the support that I needed, because that was more important than anything else. It allowed me to see the truth in other people's lives that would be open. And it allowed me to say, you know what? That isn't all the truth that I'm seeing elsewhere. And to just really realize that my life was a gift. My kids were a gift. And in that we had something beautiful. And that's sometimes hard to see when it's different than, I guess, we picture like at the conferences and now on social media. But yet, the product afterwards, I look at that and I wouldn't have changed anything. I probably would have changed maybe some of the things I taught just because I didn't know. But by God's grace, I didn't know. And I'm just going to leave it at that instead of beating myself up about it.
Yes, because we could do that all day long. The show will resume in just a minute, but first I want to share with you an incredible resource that is totally free to homeschooling families everywhere. Have you ever felt like you were on trial for your homeschooling choice when visiting a doctor or another service provider? It's unsettling, especially when someone misinformed has the power to threaten your family. Unfortunately, we have heard countless stories of parents who have felt trapped in offices and met with suspicion rather than support simply because they were homeschoolers. I've been profiled and interrogated myself, and I'm sure many of you have as well. Enough is enough. It's time we proactively vet service providers before giving them our business and our money. Enter Christy-Faith's List, a directory 100% free to homeschooling families, connecting you with homeschool-friendly service providers who promise to support you in your homeschooling choice. We want every homeschooler in America to know about and be using this list. So here's how to make Christy-Faith's List a household name. 1, tell all your friends about it. Let's show the market just how powerful the homeschool movement is. Number 2, check Christy-Faith's List website before stepping foot into any service provider's office to make sure they are on there. And number 3, if your favorite service provider isn't on the list, make sure to refer them. There's a button on the homepage of the website. It takes only 30 seconds, and that way we can send them a lovely invite. If you're listening and you are a homeschool-friendly professional, we want you on the list. We're eager to connect homeschooling families with you, shout your name from the rooftops, and bring you tons and tons of business. We have plans for every type of business, both small, local, nationwide, and worldwide. Check out ChristyFaithsList.com today. Hi, Mama. If you like my social media content and my show, I'm pretty sure you will love my book, Homeschool Rising, Shattering Myths, Finding Courage, and Opting Out of the School System. My book is for homeschool parents, both veteran and new, and the perfect book to hand any homeschool skeptics in your life so they can better understand why you've chosen this amazing lifestyle. This book will challenge you, empower you, encourage you, and give you solid, mindful answers to all those questions you get about your homeschooling choice. Grab your copy and maybe an extra one for your mother-in-law today. Homeschool Rising is available wherever books are sold. I also think, especially when you were homeschooling, there was less of an understanding about special needs. So I think I've shared with you in the past, and I also with my audience, that my sister has profound learning disabilities, comorbidities, still to this day, struggles. Yeah. One thing that she has observed at some co-ops is a little bit of judgmentalism at some co-ops, and maybe it goes along the lines of certain styles of what parents want out of their homeschooling, where if you have a kiddo that is outside of the box or maybe has some dysregulation and things like that, if you are in a co-op where you feel judged, or in a community where you feel judged for that and not seen for the mom that you are trying to be, I encourage you to reevaluate. And I love what you said, Peggy. Don't stop. We have to kiss a lot of frogs before we can find our friends, before we can find our people. And there are people out there who absolutely get it. So something that's really interesting is I had a friend who had to contact the church before VBS because her son has pandas.
Oh, yes.
And I'm going to do an episode soon on it. I'm so excited. I think this is one of the things that is so misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids are given hardcore medications with a different diagnosis, which is just so sad. So I'm hoping to raise awareness regarding that. I'm sure you've probably already done stuff on that with your podcast. But what was so fascinating, and I want this to encourage everybody listening, is when she called the director at the church, the director said, "My son has pandas."
Wow.
They would have never known. They would have never known. And so being willing to be a little bit vulnerable, I think, is worth it, and keep trying, and just let them judge you. Just, I used to say it, maybe this is a little uncouth, but I used to say, just let people suck. Just let them be judgy. They're miserable. And you just keep going. You keep going and you keep fighting. Because I agree with you, Peggy. I think finding that community and those people where we belong, I think is really important, especially when you are choosing a homeschool journey that is more difficult, because I do think it is. We all have our problems, but when you are taking on the responsibility of homeschooling a child with special needs, and if you have one, you probably have more than one,
Right.
because we do know now, studies show a lot of this stuff is genetic. Just the acknowledgement that you are putting a lot on your own shoulders. So to find those other people who can support you and see you for who you are in those efforts, and not judge your kid either, right?
Right.
Because that can happen too.
Yes.
What I want to ask you, what are some common challenges parents face when homeschooling diverse learners? We've talked about a lot already, but are there any more that you wanted to touch on?
Right. Well, so a lot of times it is, they start out fresh. And first of all, they have to combat the lie that the public school has the answers. That is the biggest one.
Wait, can we stop? Wait. Can I stop you? Can you do a deep dive right there? If you're enjoying the show and you don't want to miss out on future episodes, hit that like and subscribe button and show us some love with your comments. Those 5-star reviews really do make a difference. Yes. I so want to go there. Okay.
Yeah. So we are told that the public school is the expert on special education and that your child needs an IEP. And there was actually a dissertation written by a woman a while back who said that homeschoolers were at a disadvantage because they didn't have IEPs. And this is actually the same time her dissertation came out was when I was brought on board with the Texas Homeschool Coalition. And so my first job to do when I came in was to write a rebuttal on her dissertation. And so I wrote a 3-part rebuttal, and it's still on the Texas Homeschool Coalition's website about why homeschoolers are not disadvantaged and why they legally can write their own IEP. The reality is the Individuals with Disability in Education Act, the way it set up an IEP, and this wasn't true when the law was first written before it became the IDEA. But over time, parents became a crucial part of that IEP meeting and for an IEP to be approved. So realistically, a parent can write their own individual education plan. It just is your homeschool IEP. It doesn't hold the public school accountable. Anyways, back to the public school. But a lot of parents think that they are at a disadvantage when they don't have services for their child. The problem is most don't realize the services their children get are extra time. Guess what? You already got it when you homeschool. They are one-on-one instruction. Guess what? You got it when you homeschool. Some of it is working with a therapist, but public school therapy is not the same as private therapy. Public school therapy, the goal of that is to bring a child up to a level playing field with the peers in their grade. So that means that when a child gets up to that reading level, they stop therapy and the child has to dip below before they can get therapy again to get help to get back up to that level. The funniest story that I've ever heard was a homeschool parent was using OT for her son at the public school. And she said they discontinued his services. So they had been going through this IEP process as a homeschool family, which you can. 10% of the funds from the IDEA are actually allocated to private and homeschooled students. So you can request services. What you're going to get is always a mixed bag. But so I said, well, explain to me, what was he doing in occupational therapy? And she said, well, they were teaching him how to get on and off a bus because his legs don't always move, the way that they should. And I said, well, how does he get to therapy? Well, we drive him. So he doesn't take the bus. And I was like, well, what else do you do that's physically active that he enjoys? And she's like, well, he goes to Taekwondo and he loves that. And I said, that's your physical therapy, your occupational therapy. Forget about the school. But what a lot of people don't understand is the special education system was set up by a series of laws and mandates. It had nothing to do with about being the best situation for students with learning disabilities. It was like, okay, we're forced now to teach these kids How do we teach them and then show that we're on point with the teaching? That is what special education is. It has no regard for the actual child. It has a regard for the system.
And the amount of failure a child must experience and endure before getting even tested in the system, already the emotional damage, and I'm using that word on purpose, the emotional damage that has taken place is a problem for me, a major, major problem. It's a system that it's like it has to be so bad to get the help. And then the help that they do get is hardly anything. We have a sweet gal in Thrive Homeschool community. She was a special education teacher in the classrooms, and she is always in the forums saying to the mamas, look, this is what it would look like. This is what the therapies would look like if your child was in the system. And it's what a lot of us know who have been in the classroom and in the schools, but parents who were not professional teachers, I think we think it's a lot better than what actually is taking place, right? When you're doing group speech therapy and first off, they're not even meeting the minimum legal requirements. So say a kid needs speech therapy twice a week. At the end of the year, when they do the IEP eval, they're like, well, we didn't have the staffing, so we didn't do twice a week. And everyone just shrugs their shoulders. But you got to remember, even that speech therapy is done in a group setting often. What attention is your child actually getting? And each of those children sitting at the table have a different issue going on.
Exactly. Right.
That often is way deeper than just speech, right? You are a breast cancer survivor. And I didn't know that until you were about to come on the show. How has that experience impacted your perspective on homeschooling and health and wellness, and in the context of homeschooling too?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with cancer the month that COVID shut everything down. And that's, of course, when my organization needed the most attention.
Oh boy. Thanks for joining us for part 1. We hope you gained some valuable insights. Be sure to catch part 2 where we're going to continue this great conversation.